अस्सलाम वालेकुम। हमने टॉपिक स्टार्ट किया हुआ है जनरल अयूब खान का। इससे रिलेटेड एक लेसन नंबर 1 के अंदर मैंने आपको रिव्यू दिया था जनरल अयूब खान के रूल के हवाले से। आज इसकी पावर प्रेजेंटेशन जो है वो मैं आपके साथ शेयर कर रही हूँ। जनरल अयूब खान टाइम पीरियड इज ऑल्सो नोन एज अ ग्रेट डेकेड, क्योंकि ये 1958 से स्टार्ट होकर 69 पे कंप्लीट होता है। अगर हम इस टाइम के अंदर देखें तो हमें जो चीज़ नज़र आएगी वो वी हैव ऑलरेडी डिस्कस कि 7 अक्टूबर 1958 के अंदर फर्स्ट मार्शल लॉ इम्पोज्ड, and at that time president was Iskandar Mirza. So Ayub Khan became the chief martial law administrator, and on 27th October 1958 he got the office of president as well. On 27th October 1958, another important step took by Ayub Khan, which was introduction of basic democracies. According to this system, 80,000 basic democrats were elected, and these basic democrats gave vote for the presidentship. So, winning 95.6% of the vote, Ayub Khan confirmed as a president of Pakistan. 1960 की एरा के अंदर हमें जो नजर आती है इम्पोर्टेंट चीज के एज अ रेफरेंडम, result of the referendum, Ayub Khan became the president for next 5 years and replaced his military government into civilian constitutional government. Ayub Khan promulgated the Constitution of 1962 on March 1st. इसमें जो चीज़ हमें नज़र आएगी इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ वो ये भी है कि a new capital was built which was named Islamabad. And you all know that the previous capital of Pakistan was Karachi. नेक्स्ट हम शेयर करते हैं 1965 प्रेसिडेंशियल इलेक्शन। प्रेसिडेंशियल इलेक्शंस के अंदर जो ओपोनेंट है यानी उनकी कंपेटिटर है अयूब खान की, शी वाज फातिमा जिन्ना। यू ऑल नो दैट शी इज सिस्टर ऑफ मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना, बट एंड शी वाज सपोर्टेड बाय ऑल द पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज। लेकिन इसके बावजूद जो रिजल्ट ऑफ द इलेक्शंस हैं इट वाज quite amazing because 65% of vote was won by President Ayub Khan, but he was charged rigging in elections. Then I share another slide with you. Next one. Indo-Pak War, another important event during Ayub Khan's time period. Indo-Pak War जो है इसके अंदर 2 cities of Pakistan was quite offensive. It was Lahore and Sialkot. It was 17-day war, ठीक है, caused thousands of casualties both sides and also witnessed the largest tank battle since World War II. इसके अंदर जिन कंट्रीज ने पाकिस्तान को सपोर्ट किया और जो न्यूट्रल रहे उसके बारे में भी यहाँ पर आपको इंफॉर्मेशन दी हुई है। इसके साथ ही हमें जो और एक इम्पोर्टेंट चीज इसके अंदर इस स्लाइड के अंदर नजर आती है, नेक्स्ट स्लाइड के अंदर, वो मैं आपके साथ शेयर करूंगी। 1966 के अंदर पाकिस्तान साइन ताशकंद डिक्लेरेशन. It was a peace agreement signed to resolve the Indo-Pak War of 1965. Although the peace had been achieved, but you can see that there was, due to the intervention of the great powers, but it erupted different problems because some of the some of leading elite was against this agreement. और इसको हम बाद के दिनों के अंदर देखते हैं कि this was a rift started between the elite and Ayub Khan. और उसके अंदर हमें एक और चीज़ भी इस इवेंट इस ईयर के अंदर हमें नजर आती है, which is 1966 के अंदर अवामी लीग presented 6 points. अवामी लीग led by शेख मुजीबुर रहमान, और यही अवामी लीग जो है उसमें सेपरेशन ऑफ बांग्लादेश के अंदर भी इम्पोर्टेंट रोल जो है वो प्ले किया. Then comes on 1969, which was the end of Ayub Khan's rule, or he resigned in 1969, and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who also appeared as a prominent figure because he became the chairman of EPP. So this was a review of whole reign of Ayub Khan. अब हम एग्जाम क्वेश्चंस की तरफ आते हैं जो कि हमने स्टार्ट किए हुए हैं. तो हम आज जो क्वेश्चन कर रहे हैं उसके वो मैं आपके साथ शेयर कर रही हूँ. Today we are doing question number 5, which is related to explain why Ayub Khan called the year 1958 to 69 the decade of progress. The decade of progress. You can see on your screen, Ayub Khan started many economic development projects. He hired many trained economists. He got huge amount of foreign aid that was used to stimulate industrialization. He offered several incentives to the private sectors that included concessions in taxes, tax holiday, and export bonus scheme. Tax holiday means exemption of tax, because when an industry is established, about 3 years are given to the industries for exempting tax to pay their tax. These measures attracted a great number of industrialists, and the large-scale manufacturing industry grew rapidly. During the second five-year plan, 1960 to 65, manufacturing output grew at an annual average rate of around 11.5%. During this period, people's income went up by an average of 14% as a result, and Pakistan achieved a very high economic growth rate of 7% that was twice that of India. Then comes on next, which we are discussing the agricultural reforms as well. Secondly, Ayub Khan's agricultural reforms are rightly called the Green Revolution. Green Revolution term you have already read in geography in Agriculture chapter. He introduced modernization of agriculture. Tractors, threshers, and combined harvesters were used to speed up the process of cultivation. HYVs, yani high yielding variety seeds, chemical fertilizers, insecticides, and pesticides were used to maximize the agricultural output. Under the Indus Water Treaty 1960, Pakistan was funded to build large dams and barrages. Thus, water for irrigation and power production was stored on large scale, and output of major crops increased significantly. Last paragraph, we will explain the social reforms here. Lastly, his social reforms were also very popular in order to provide better health care. New medical colleges and hospitals were set up. Attempts were made to control a high population growth rate through a family planning program. He tried to raise the literacy rate by encouraging primary education and set up polytechnic institutions to prepare a trained industrial workforce. Though most of the benefits of these reforms went to West Pakistan, Ayub Khan was able to deflect criticism by celebrating the decade of development in 1960. 8. So in this way, we are going to prove that Ayub Khan's 10 years time period is also known as Decade of Development. Uh, Previously, we have done another question, which was question number 4. How did martial law 1958 affect Pakistan's politics? We have done this question on Tuesday. So I'll discuss it with you as well so we can note it down. This is another 7-mark question. Uh, we are discussing here the effects of martial law because this was the first time martial law imposed in Pakistan. So how it affects the politics we are discussing in the given paragraph. On taking power, Ayub Khan annulled the 1956 constitution. The National Assembly was dismissed and a huge number of national and provincial politicians were arrested and charged with corruption. Political parties were made illegal and there were strict controls on people holding meetings and on the freedom of the press. More than 1,600 civil servants screened for misconduct were either dismissed or forced into early retirement. Determined to rid Pakistan of the politicians he so disliked, Ayub Khan made the elected body's disqualification order. You can find a question, what was Abdo told? You can use this information for answering 4-mark question as well. Anyone accused corruption or improper behavior could choose between either a trial or retirement from public of life. 7,000 people were dealt with by Abdo. This effectively eliminated many important figures who might have challenged Ayub Khan's rule. Pakistanis certainly disliked Ayub Khan's seizure of power but were powerless to do anything about it. Another aspect of Pakistani's feelings we can see here that Pakistanis hope that Ayub Khan would not be too repressive and would prepare the way for a return to democracy. So in this way, we are going to answer the effects of imposition of first martial law. So now we have done question number 4 and question number 5 as well. In next class, we are going to attempt question number 6, which is related to, again, reforms. But this is 14-mark answer. You can see here that Ayub Khan's agricultural reforms were more successful than any other of his domestic policies between 1958 and 1969. Do you agree or disagree? Give reasons for your answer. So when you are going this type of question with this keyword, do you agree or disagree? It means that you have a choice now to opt agree or disagree. But in the first sentence, you are opting, are you going to agree or disagree? In this answer, I'm going to disagree it, but it doesn't mean that I will skip agricultural reforms. No, I will discuss agricultural reforms with their negative impacts first, right? And then I will discuss or explain the other reforms. So look at this. When I'm going to start my answer, I'm going to write here, I disagree with the statement that Ayub Khan's agricultural reforms were more successful than any other of his domestic policies. No doubt, the land reforms were aimed at improving the status of the tenants and agricultural production, but they were marred by several loopholes. It means that first I'm giving or describing the aims of these reforms, and then comes on the negative impacts. Several loopholes which are fully exploited by the landlords to their advantage. The land ceiling was fixed per person and not per family. This allowed big landowners to transfer the surplus land to their relatives. The task of implementation The task of implementation of the land reforms fell on the bureaucrats who were suspectedly to influence and pressure applied by the landlords against of the tenants. Although there has been some controversy amongst analysts regarding the beneficiaries of the Green Revolution, but the big landlords certainly benefited from it. Firstly, the economic viability of tractors and tubewells required large holdings. Secondly, access to finance had to exist if new technology was to be used. Thirdly, high yield seeds through raised productivity but were more risk. They required greater precision in the use of water and chemical fertilizer, were less hardy against climatic changes and less immune to pests and insects. Thus, if all went well, returns were expected to be high, but the entire crop could be wasted if things went wrong. A small farmer was naturally reluctant to take such risk. In other words, the big landlords had the influence to get loans, to get tractors and tubewells sanctioned, and to take the risk of using high yield seeds. The poor peasants and the tenants, cultivators had neither the resources nor the influence to use or risk new techniques of cultivation. In terms of regional distribution of prosperity resulting from the Green Revolution, Punjab was the main beneficiary. अब ये main beneficiary किस तरह से है? We are proving it that according to a farm mechanization report, over 90% of the tubewells installed and over 75% of the tractor sanctions were in Punjab. Moreover, it was also estimated that in terms of the tubewells and tractors could be found on farms of over 25 acres. Thus, it can be concluded that the big landlords came out of the Green Revolution much richer and much stronger, and the relative income disparities between the rich and the poor had increased as a result. In fact, the tenant farmer lost his bargaining power owing to the increasing use of agricultural machines, which enabled the landowners to increase the ratio of self-cultivated land on their farms. So, in this way, we have completed a type of question which was asked with the keyword, do you agree or disagree? If you disagree, it means that you are denying this statement and you are giving all negative impacts of this reform. It means you are writing only on one side. So in this way, we have completed this answer. Our next question would be related to the next reforms. Then you can find a question like this. Constitutional reforms were the most important of Ayub Khan's domestic policies. during the decade of development between 1958 to 69. Do you agree? Give reasons for your answer. अब यहाँ पर जो कीवर्ड यूज हो रहा है वो है डू यू एग्री। इसका मतलब ये है कि क्या हम अपना आंसर जो है वो डिफरेंट टाइप से अटेम्प्ट करेंगे। हमारा प्रीवियस यानी क्वेश्चन नंबर 6 जो था, वी हैव आंसर ओनली वन साइड, यानी वी निगेट the given statement। लेकिन when we are using the term do you agree, इसका मतलब ये होगा कि यहाँ पर we are writing on both sides, यानी first we will explain the constitutional reforms and then the other reforms as well। You all know that this is a 14-mark question, so you are giving your answer in 5 paragraphs, राइट बेटा। सो इस आंसर को आप ये जून 2004 एंड जून 2012 के अंदर ये पूछा गया है। इस आंसर को आप अपने एज एन असाइनमेंट अटेम्प्ट करेंगे एंड देन यू विल सबमिट योर असाइनमेंट ऑन मंडे। सो इस तरह से मैं आज का लेसन अपना कंप्लीट करती हूँ यहाँ पर, यानी वी हैव डन टोटल 6 क्वेश्चंस।